move to the next talk on the schedule, which is Matthew, who is also a postdoc at the Institute for Theoretical Astrophysics in Oslo. You can start to see a pattern here, and he will talk us about sidelobes.
So, yep, I'm Matthew. I'm a postdoc at Oslo, and I'm going to be talking to you about the treatment of the sidelobes that we did for LFI in the BeyondPlanck pipeline. So you guys have probably seen this data model about 50 times by this point, but just to remind everyone, this is the full LFI data model that we implemented in BeyondPlanck. And basically, we're going to be focusing on the far side lobe term that's highlighted here. So for performance reasons, we have processed the main beam signals separately from the side lobe signals. So the side lobe signals, we're doing basically a full sky convolution that, if you wanted to include the main beam, would also be very computationally expensive. So we instead treat the main beam and the side lobes completely separately. Also, unlike most of the rest of the terms in this data model, the side lobes are not actually being sampled in a Gibbs manner at the moment. We're just recomputing them based on the new sky models that we are passed at every iteration of the Gibbs chain. So this means that we don't actually get full sample sets over all of the side lobe parameters. We just have the side lobes as a function of each of the values of the other parameters. And then finally, what we do is once we have this estimate of the side lobe signal, we treat it basically as a nuisance signal, and we subtract out the side lobe, the contribution, before we produce our final maps. The signal that we actually subtract is computed in the time domain using an algorithm very similar to total convolver or libconvict, if people are familiar with that was used on Planck. And for right now, as I said, we're not actually sampling any of the terms in this side lobe model. So what we're doing is we're treating the input side lobe models as the truth, and we are not varying them yet. So what do these side lobe models look like? So on the left, you can see side lobe maps for the three LFI frequencies, 70, 44, and 30 gigahertz. And on the right here at the top, you can see the various parts of these side lobe beams explained. So these maps are made such that the main beam would be pointed directly towards the north pole of this Heel-Pix map. And then you have these other two main contributions. We have the spillover from the primary mirror, so light that escapes from the primary mirror. And then we also have this dimmer term here that's spillover from the secondary mirror. And so these are basically the main contributions to the side lobe response on the sky that come from the instrument. How are we calculating these? So as I said, we implemented a side lobe estimation code based on libconvict. We compute basically a full sky data cube of our convolution signal. So this C term here is basically the side lobe intensity as a function of our pointing parameters on the sky. And then we compute this using basically LibSharp's spin-weighted spherical harmonic transforms, which are sort of the fastest spherical harmonic transforms that we know of, at least. And the full derivation of how this works will be in the paper, but I'm not going to go through all of it today because no one wants to sit through that. And so once we have this full sky convolution cube, then at runtime we use basically a splining procedure to interpolate this convolution cube at fixed resolution to the actual full resolution time domain data that we're looking for. So what do these side lobe maps look like? So these are the mean maps that come out of our pipeline run for 30, 44, and 70 gigahertz. And as you can see, basically the 30 and 70 gigahertz side lobe pickups are significantly more intense than the 40 gigahertz or the 44 gigahertz side lobe maps here. And that's in keeping with previous findings on this topic. So the structure of the side lobe maps, you can see there's this sort of big ring feature here. And then there are some basically stripes that follow the Planck scan strategy in certain rings. And additionally, because of course we are taking multiple samples of these side lobes, what we can do is look at the RMS of these estimates of the side lobes and look at basically the uncertainties or how much those sidelobe maps that we just looked at vary as a function of iteration. And so this is these maps here, which are basically the RMS of the previous maps that we looked at. And you can see that the RMS is mostly dominated by features that were themselves in those sidelobe maps. So that's not unexpected. So what another thing we were sort of looking into is what would happen, or what sort of effects would we expect the sidelobes to have on the data. So what we did is we ran a second pipeline execution that instead of correcting for the sidelobe terms, instead did nothing with our sidelobes at all. And we looked at how that difference would propagate through the rest of the pipeline. So on the left here, you can see the frequency maps that were generated from the difference of these two pipelines, the one with sidelobe correction and the one without. And you can see a couple features that pop out immediately. So first of all, without proper modeling of the sidelobes, the calibrations are definitely wrong. There's a large monopole offset at all of our 3 LFI frequencies. And secondly, at 30 and 70 gigahertz, you definitely see a strong dipole effect as well, maybe not so much as 44 gigahertz. And then you get these sort of residual stripy rings that look a lot like the big rings in the sidelobe signal. So that's almost certainly a sidelobe signal that's leaking through into the maps themselves. And basically the reason that this is interesting is that we know that the knowledge of the sidelobes are not perfect even as they are right now. So this implies that this same sort of problem is leaking through into our actual data, albeit at a much lower level than this dumb thing of not correcting them at all. And so really the big takeaway from this for future experiments is that there is basically, there's no way to know your beams and sidelobes too well. The better you can know them, the easier this analysis process will be at the end. But so sort of the good news is that, so these are component map differences from the previous run that I was talking about, where we compare a run with sidelobe correction to a run without sidelobe correction. And you can see that in terms of the component map differences, it looks mostly like noise, except possibly there's still a dipole structure in the CMB here as well. So that is good. But if you remember that that plot of correlated noise that Eirik just showed you in his presentation, you can see now looking at it and thinking back to what our maps of the sidelobes look like, that it is pretty easy to convince yourself that there's the same sort of big circular structure here that the sidelobes produce. And so our working theory is that a lot of this extra sidelobe signal that we don't know about has been sort of sucked up into the correlated noise estimation. And it's behaving sort of as a junk catcher that picks up small effects that we aren't otherwise modeling. So what do we intend to do in the future with these sidelobe models? So the first thing that we've been talking about is producing realistic parameterized beam models. So taking those beam response functions that I showed before and either breaking them up spatially by picking some sort of regions and assigning them spatial shapes, or producing some sort of more refined model of the optical system and parameterizing that. And then taking these free parameters in your model, either the amplitudes of these shapes or your optical description, and then using that to sample your sidelobe response on the sky. So to sample all of these parameters that you have used to describe your sidelobe models. And this, of course, would give you basically uncertainties on what your sidelobes were, because of the way that the Gibbs sampling process explores the full probability distributions. So that's one thing we're talking about. And the other thing we're talking about is doing, instead of just treating the sidelobes as a nuisance term, we're thinking of applying this same time domain convolution algorithm to instead use the full 4 pi beam instead of just the sidelobes. And that would, instead of treating the main beam and the sidelobes differently, you just convolve the full sky with your full 4 pi beam description at every step. And that gives you basically a full sky signal estimate that the detector will be seeing. And in principle, this would also work for experiments that have asymmetric beams, because you can give it an asymmetric 4 pi distribution and it would still be able to convolve that. So this is definitely feasible at lower resolutions, but as you go up in NSIDE, this might get prohibitively slow. So we will definitely have to look into which cases that this would be most effective for. And what basically the dominant time cost in this sidelobe convolution thing is not actually the computation of the big data cube. It's it's the interpolation method. So the splining of your data cube to get your actual sample by sample description of your sidelobe signal. And so we are already working on faster interpolation methods that are working in a standalone code at the moment and will probably be ported into the full pipeline in the future. So I just want to acknowledge the funding that has been given to us by the European Union's Horizon 2020 project, without which we could not have completed this project at all. And I would like to ask if there are any questions.